Life doesn't always go our way. Some days we wake up with a heavy heart and don't know why. Some things, no matter how much effort we pour into them, just don't work out. Some people we once loved quietly drift away. There are times when we try to explain, try to prove, try to hold on to a relationship or a reputation that seems important. But the harder we try, the more tangled things become. It's like water. When stirred, the more you stir it, the cloudier it gets. Only when you stop does the water gradually settle and become clear. The human mind is like that water. There's no need to search for peace far away. Just disturb it less, and peace will naturally return. Silence is not weakness, but a kind of wisdom that helps us return to the inherent clarity of our mind. Many say that in life, we have to fight for a position, have to win or lose to prove our worth. But if we look deeply, we'll see that what truly exhausts us isn't external challenges, but our internal reactions. When misunderstood, we immediately want to explain. When criticized, we immediately want to retort. When someone doesn't acknowledge us, we instantly feel small. That's because the ego always demands protection. But Buddha once taught that words not rooted in compassion, even if true, become false. Silence stemming from understanding can sometimes be more illuminating than 1,000 justifications. Silence doesn't mean we don't know how to speak, but that we understand words only have value when they come from a peaceful mind. Some arguments seem like victories, but are actually losses. Winning an argument, but losing harmony. Winning words, but losing affection. Winning against others, but losing ourselves. At such times, we realize that victory in arguments brings no happiness. The one who knows to stop in the midst of anger is not the loser, but the wise one, like a rower encountering strong waves. If they try to row against them, the boat will capsize. Only by stopping and waiting for the waves to calm can they see a clear direction. In life, just a moment of silence, a gentle breath, a kind smile can calm the storm within our hearts. Yet, some people lose their entire families just for a word of one-upmanship. Some couples, deeply in love, drift apart forever simply because neither was willing to see the other's perspective. A monk once met a woman who asked, "I live well, but people still speak ill of me. I've done nothing wrong, yet my heart still aches." The monk simply asked, "Do you live well for inner peace or for others' praise? If you do good deeds because you want recognition, then that is not true goodness. But if your actions come from a pure heart, then the praise or criticism of others is just like an echo in a cave." We can't make others be silent, but we can choose our own reactions. If we choose to argue, we only amplify karma. If we choose silence, sometimes we are dissolving the negative seeds we once sowed. The wise are not afraid of worldly opinions because they understand that worldly opinions are like wind. They can blow strongly, but cannot shake a solid rock. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught that just as a solid rock is unshaken by the wind, the wise are unmoved by praise or blame. Dear practitioners, silence is not an escape, but a return. When we know to stop, we can hear the true voice of our heart. That voice is not noisy, not competitive, doesn't need recognition, yet is full of power. The more mature one becomes, the less one feels the need to prove anything. Not because they can't, but because they no longer wish to. When the mind has settled, even if the winds of life blow, they are just the song of impermanence. Silence is not defeat, but a way of winning with wisdom and compassion. For when we conquer ourselves, no one in this world can ever defeat us. When we know to hold back a word of anger, we are preserving some good karma for the future. When we know to stop an argument, we are opening a new path for our mind to step onto. And sometimes, just being silent at the right time, life will naturally change its colors. I invite you to embark on the journey of listening to silence, not to escape life, but to live more deeply within its currents. For silence is not the end of speaking, but the beginning of understanding. Silence is not the loss of a voice, but a voice filtered through peace. And who knows, perhaps by being less competitive and more silent, life will naturally change. Some mornings, I sit alone on my porch, watching the sunlight gently filter through the leaves, feeling quiet and warm. In a fleeting moment, I realize that often life doesn't need too much noise. No need for winning or losing. No need to determine right or wrong. Just a moment of silence is enough to refresh the soul. This life is inherently impermanent and constantly changing. Like the many rivers out there, sometimes full, sometimes shallow, sometimes raging, sometimes calm. We humans are the same. When we chase after wins and losses, chase after proving ourselves skilled, right, or important, our minds will always be restless. But when we know to stop, know to be silent at the right time, the mind will naturally settle and brighten, like water that has stopped being stirred. Buddhist teachings often suggest that humans are born with a heart capable of love. But then the currents of life, arguments, ego, self-importance, and the fear of losing face make us dry up. It is these increasingly loud noises that obscure the purest part within us. Perhaps you have experienced this feeling. The more you talk, the more exhausted you feel. The harder you try to prove yourself right, the more restless your mind becomes. After an argument, even if you win logically, your heart feels empty. Perhaps what we need is not to try to win, but to know when to step out of the game. In Buddhism, there is a beautiful example. The human mind is like the water in a well. The more you stir it, the murkier it gets. Only when you let it be, will it naturally become clear. Many ask why silence can change a person's life. I say it is because silence is the way to extinguish the motivations of aversion, craving, and delusion. Aversion is anger. Craving is wanting more. Delusion is being confused and not knowing you're confused. These three are like three fires. Silence is the way to remove all fuel, so the fire extinguishes itself. Proper silence does not make us lose out. It helps protect our mind, cultivating mindfulness and compassion in every word, every thought, every action. I recall a teaching from the Buddha. Words not rooted in compassion, even if true, become false. Sometimes we speak correctly, with sharp logic and complete arguments. But if there is no compassion, no love in our heart, then our words also turn into sharp points that wound the listener. The harm is that when the listener is hurt, we ourselves also become exhausted. The battle of logic only brings a temporary feeling of winning or losing, and in the end, everyone is lonely. Silence is not giving up. Silence is for preserving the sacred energy of the soul. It is to know that not every battle needs to be fought, and not everything needs to be said to be considered complete. Sometimes stillness itself becomes the greatest strength. Allow me to share a very ordinary story, yet one that holds a profound lesson about the mind and silence. In a small rural village, there lived Mrs. Two, who every morning would draw water from her deep well. Her well water was very clear. You could see the bottom. But some days, Mrs. Two would use a stick to stir the water to see if there was anything beneath. And the more she stirred, the murkier the water became. She would wait and wait, but the water wouldn't clear up. One day, her grandchild came and asked why the well water didn't look clean, like usual. She just smiled and said, "Because Grandma stirred it, child." The human mind is the same. The more you stir it, the murkier it gets. Just be silent, and everything will settle on its own. The grandchild didn't quite understand. But then every time he got angry at someone, he would sit silently in a corner, remembering his grandma's words. In silence, he realized that what he was angry about yesterday wasn't really worth speaking out about further. The more silent he became, the more he understood, and the more peaceful his heart became. That small story made me ponder for a long time. It turns out the human heart also has such a well. The more we try to stir it to find answers, the more we try to prove ourselves right. The more we want to drag everything out to argue, the more agitated our mind becomes. But when we are willing to sit still, to quiet our heart, and observe everything, things will naturally reveal their truest nature. We no longer fight with emotions, but observe them like clouds passing across the sky. The Buddha once taught that everything in life is impermanent. Emotions, sadness, joy, anger, resentment are the same. They just pass through. They don't stay forever. If we don't cling to them, they will pass, and our heart will lighten again. Silence is also a way to cultivate wisdom. In silence, we see ourselves more clearly. Silence helps us know what we truly want, what we are afraid of, and what we are running from. A wise person is not someone who talks a lot, but someone who knows when to speak and when to be silent. Being silent at the right time is like stepping back to gain perspective, to understand that not everything is worth getting caught up in desire and ill will. There's a Buddhist saying I deeply cherish. If we can keep our mind calm for just a few minutes each day, life will change its course immensely. The Fat Fap Lin Ung channel once worked with a colleague who always wanted to have the last word in every meeting. He talked a lot, was good at debating, had sharp arguments, but was always tense. There was another colleague who spoke very little, just observed and listened. Each time she spoke, it was only a few sentences, but it made everyone pause and think. She never argued, never imposed. She was just serene, like clear water. Once I asked her why she always remained so calm. She looked at me, smiled gently, and said, "Because I don't see words as weapons to defeat others. I believe if I need to speak, I will speak with a compassionate heart. But if speaking doesn't help anyone, I'll be silent." At that moment, I realized she was truly the strongest person in the entire group. In truth, silence is not escape. Silence is for nurturing the mind, so the mind as a peaceful refuge. Meanwhile, many people out there live in the constant noise of work, social media, comparisons, and worries about the future. They think that if they don't speak, if they don't argue, they will be forgotten, considered weak. But I ask myself, what do people need most in the end? Is it recognition? Is it victory? Or is it a place for the mind to rest? When the mind is tired, the most precious refuge is silence. In Buddhist scriptures, it is taught that all aversion and delusion come from a discriminating mind. A discriminating mind is one that always compares, always judges, always wants to define right and wrong. But when the mind knows to be silent, it transcends that duality. There is no longer clear right or wrong, only understanding and compassion. The path of practice is not to avoid all conflict, but to know how to move towards peace. When conflict arises, some people think practice means going to the mountains, entering a temple, avoiding the world. But in truth, practice is learning to be silent amidst life, learning to keep the mind undisturbed, no matter how chaotic life becomes. Have you ever experienced a silence that felt very powerful? A feeling that is neither giving up nor enduring, but a conscious choice. Choosing silence, not because you dare not speak, but because you realize that speaking won't make others understand you better. Choosing silence because you don't want to sow more karma with every word. Choosing silence because you know that everything will eventually pass. The words you speak today, perhaps tomorrow, you won't even want to repeat. Such silence is wisdom and also compassion. I always believe that the deeper a person understands the Dharma, the fewer words they speak, not because they don't know how to speak, but because they clearly understand the power of silence. Silence helps us hear our inner voice more clearly. Silence helps us realize that what we need is not to defeat anyone, but to overcome ourselves. The person who is silent in the right way is not the loser, but the one who has conquered their own heart. And when we conquer our own heart, life will naturally change in ways we never expected. One afternoon, I returned to my hometown and stopped by Mrs. Tu's house. She was still sitting by the well, just like always. She looked at me and said, "You know, the well water doesn't need to be stirred to be clear. The human mind is the same. The harder you try to make it clear, the more agitated it becomes. Often, you just need to sit still, breathe gently, and look deep into your heart, and you will naturally understand." I asked her, "But life has so many things that make me angry, frustrated. How can I be silent?" She smiled and didn't answer immediately. She just scooped a bucket of water, waited a few minutes for it to settle, then showed it to me. "See? When the water settles, you can see the bottom of the well. Only when your mind is still can you see the truth. But when you're angry and keep talking and talking, it's all just murky, child." I held the bucket of water, looked down into the well, and felt my heart lighten. Perhaps you are also carrying your own battles. Perhaps you are also trying to prove something to someone. But my friend, not every battle in life needs to be argued to be won. There are some battles where knowing when to walk away is already a victory. There are some silences that don't make us lose anything, but help us regain ourselves. Many think that silence is a sign of weakness, but no, it is a gift for those profound enough to understand that compassion can heal all things that logic never can. If at some point you feel too tired of the noise of life, try silence. Be silent to listen to what your mind is saying. Be silent to realize that you don't need to try to be like anyone else. Be silent to see that while the outside world is full of turbulence, the inner world always has a peaceful corner waiting for you to return to. When you step into that moment of silence, you will feel life become much lighter. And who knows, in that silence, you might hear the voice of your heart, the voice of understanding, the voice of love. That is the moment your life begins to change. There's a strange thing in this life that the more I mature, the more clearly I perceive most people spend too much time arguing about things that don't need to be argued, trying to prove themselves right in matters that aren't important, competing in battles where, even after they end, they don't understand why they participated. Some say that people don't mature with age, but they mature when they know what to hold on to and what to let go of. I find that to be a profound truth. Many consider themselves strong when they speak a lot, with sharp logic and quick rebuttals. But in truth, strength does not lie in what we say, but in what we choose not to say. Human life is inherently impermanent. A single word can push two people apart for a lifetime. So what is the point of winning or losing? If after winning an argument, what remains is a weary soul and a relationship that can never return to its former state. The Fat Phap Lin Ung channel believes that you have experienced that feeling when you won an argument, but your heart felt no joy. You once felt you had to win, had to be recognized, had to express everything you thought. But after speaking, an unnamed, vague void appeared. The words you spoke, even if true, no longer brought joy. It is then that we understand that winning or losing verbally is never a true victory. The Buddha once taught that human life is like morning dew on a leaf, like a cloud in the sky. It appears and then vanishes. Winning a word, but losing a person. Winning an argument, but losing one's own peace. Is that still a victory? I suddenly understood that a good speaker can impress others, but only one who knows when to be silent can truly earn people's admiration. In Buddhism, attachment is considered an invisible burden. Clinging to right or wrong, clinging to me, clinging to them, clinging to the belief that one is the center, clinging to the belief that everyone must understand oneself. That attachment makes people heavier and heavier because it's like a burden of stones on their shoulders, unaware that they can put it down at any time. The larger the ego, the heavier the burden. How many people in society always live with the mindset that they must prove themselves right, must argue to the end, must be superior or inferior to others. And that very thing causes them to lose the most precious thing, peace of mind. I once heard a monk say that a practitioner doesn't win by logic, but by a peaceful mind. That saying made me ponder for a long time because it is simple yet profound. Society teaches us how to conquer others, while the Dharma teaches us how to conquer ourselves. The human psyche tends to react whenever insulted or denied. In the brain, there are automatic mechanisms to protect the ego that make us react immediately when criticized or disrespected. But that very reaction turns us into victims of our own emotions. In truth, anger is like a passing cloud. If we cling to it, we will be swept away. But if we step back and see it as just an undefined cloud, we will see it come and go very quickly. Someone once said that speaking in anger is like wielding a knife. That blade can hurt others, but first and foremost, you yourself will be wounded. A wise person is not someone who is always on the attack, but someone who knows when to stop before the blade touches the soul. Let me tell you the story of Mr. Nam, a kind man from my hometown. But because of a small incident, his whole family had to endure a heavy dinner. He had a chicken that liked to go to the neighbor's garden to scratch for worms. One afternoon, the chicken went there again and ruined the newly planted vegetable patch. The neighbor, angry, came to his house. Words were exchanged, and it eventually turned into an argument. Mr. Nam was caught in a mindset where he had to save face, had to prove that the fault wasn't entirely his, that the matter wasn't significant enough to warrant shouting. The neighbor, on the other hand, felt that if they didn't speak up, others would disrespect them. Neither person was willing to yield. As evening fell, Mr. Nam sat down at the dinner table, but couldn't swallow a bite. The yellow light cast down on the silent meal. His wife and children looked at him, no one daring to speak. He looked around, and a question kept echoing in his mind. If I win the argument, but lose affection, is that truly winning? That question repeated in his head like a bell, making him sit still as a statue. Dinner was supposed to be a time for family to gather. But that evening, silence became a distance. He suddenly felt his heart heavy and began to wonder why such a small matter could make his mind so restless. After a while, he quietly stepped onto the porch. The wind blew gently. He recalled once reading a teaching from the Buddha. If we cling to right and wrong, suffering will come. But if we let go of our ego, peace will naturally return. He thought of his neighbor, thought of the chicken, thought of the words he had uttered, and suddenly understood that winning a single argument can sometimes mean losing an entire lifetime. That loss isn't a loss of logic, but a loss of one's own mind. That night, he couldn't sleep peacefully. The next morning, he decided to go to his neighbor's house, not to argue again, but to apologize and take responsibility for his part. The neighbor was initially stunned, but then softened. They sat together on the porch, drank tea, and everything passed as lightly as the wind. Mr. Nam recounted that at that moment he truly felt victorious, not winning against others, but winning against the anger in his heart. And that made him feel lighter than ever before. I find that in that story, there is something worth pondering. In life, often winning an argument means losing other precious things that we can never reclaim. Winning an argument, but losing affection. Winning words, but losing friends. Winning against others, but losing ourselves. That is not winning. In truth, acceptance is never weakness. Acceptance is the courage of one who masters their mind. Acceptance is knowing that we can take a step back without losing anything. On the contrary, we can preserve clarity within our hearts. A skilled speaker is not necessarily strong. A person who knows when to be silent is truly wise. In daily life, we can see many examples. Many families lose harmony due to small arguments. Many colleagues drift apart because no one is willing to yield in a meeting. Many loved ones have to separate just because of an unchecked word. So, If it's all just about winning or losing, is it worth it? In the Dhammapada, there is a verse that says, if one knows how to be silent, like a broken bell, then even if attacked by others, one can maintain a peaceful mind. That silence isn't endurance, but a serenity stemming from understanding. A person who understands the Dharma does not try to argue with the world, but quietly lives in accordance with their own mind. They know that all comparisons, judgments, wins, and losses will eventually vanish like smoke. What remains is only whether one's mind is at peace or not. Life is inherently impermanent, like a river flowing through many seasons. If we constantly try to prove ourselves right, we will miss many peaceful moments that are passing right before our eyes. One who lives in harmony with karma and lets go of the ego will find that life is simpler than we imagine. If you ask me how to let go of competitiveness, I would say, first, learn to look at your own mind. Every time anger arises, ask yourself, is this truly important? Will it still be important a month from now? A year from now? Many people have tried that approach and realized that most of the things we argue about are not worth losing our peace over. When anger arises, remember that a practitioner wins with a peaceful mind, not with a sharp tongue. Silence, in that moment, can save a lifetime. Compassion can heal a wound that logic can never reach. I often say that if one day you find everything too heavy, find a quiet place and breathe deeply. Inhale, let go. Exhale, smile. Tell yourself that not everything needs to be about winning or losing. Observe emotions as you observe clouds in the sky. They come and they go. They arise and they dissipate. To live peacefully is to know what is worth holding on to and what should be let go of. The outside world can be chaotic and unbearable, but within you, there is always a peaceful corner waiting for you to return. If you listen to your heart, you will find that strength lies not in winning or losing, but in the ability to let go. Only when we know how to let go are we truly strong. And when the mind is strong, life will naturally change. This life is truly strange. The faster one runs, the easier one stumbles. The tighter one tries to hold on to something, the easier it slips from grasp. Many people live their whole lives only to realize that it's not grand things that break a person, but small things. Fleeting arguments, moments of anger are what make us lose everything. Life is like a body of water. If we constantly stir it, murky sediments will rise. But if we just stop, that water can become surprisingly clear. The wise person is not one who wins every argument, but one who knows when to stop before things spiral out of control. Silence is not defeat, but sometimes it is the wisdom of souls who have understood that winning and losing only make people lose their peace. Looking at life around us, perhaps everyone has witnessed separations caused by just a single word. People who once loved each other suddenly can't even look at each other, all because of an argument that wasn't worth much. Some families seemed on the verge of breaking apart, simply because one evening, everyone wanted to be right. Some couples, deeply in love for decades, still have moments where their hearts burn like fire, and an unchecked word causes deep pain to the other. Strangely enough, people can spend a lifetime building a relationship, but just 1 minute of unchecked impulse can destroy everything. Such is impermanence. Just one thought arising, one thought of anger, is enough to turn all efforts into nothing. Buddha taught that the human mind is like a wild horse. If we don't know how to tame it, it will drag us towards suffering. Anger is the strongest fire among the three poisons. For once, it flares up. It not only burns ourselves, but also consumes our dearest loved ones beside us. Often, after every argument, people ask themselves, why did I lose my temper like that? Why did I lose my loved one over such a small thing? But alas, by the time that question arises, everything has already happened. Sometimes, just a deep breath, just 10 seconds of silence, could have saved an entire home, a relationship, a lifetime. In Buddhism, stopping is not weakness or escape, but wisdom itself. A practitioner knows that before doing anything, the mind must be at peace first. Then words can be clear. If the mind is not at peace, words are just the winds of anger, only causing harm to the listener. Thich Nhat Hanh often reminded us that when angry, don't speak, just breathe. One breath can save a life because breath is the thread that pulls us back to the present. When we are angry, the mind is living in darkness. But when we breathe, we return to the light. That is the first step of wisdom. Someone once asked a monk, "Master, how can I avoid arguments?" The monk just smiled and said, "When you feel your mind about to get agitated, don't say anything. Just breathe and look at your mind as you would a vulnerable friend. Just look, don't resist, don't react, and the mind will gradually settle." Many who heard this thought, what can just one breath change? But in truth, that very moment could sometimes save the fate of an entire family. The angry mind arises in just 3 seconds. If we can overcome those 3 seconds, we have passed through the gate of suffering. The story of Ms. Han is an example. She was a simple woman who loved her husband and children, always striving to keep her family warm and peaceful. But life doesn't always go smoothly. Her husband worked far away, and when he returned, he also had many pressures, and speaking clumsily could easily upset his wife. One evening, amidst financial stress and child-rearing, the couple had a loud argument. Both were tired. Both wanted the other to understand them. At that moment, just one word from her husband hurt her deeply. She was indignant and wanted to retort. In that instant, she recalled the monk's teaching from her visit to the temple. When you are angry, take a deep breath and don't say anything. Give yourself a chance to stop before it's too late. She tried it. 10 seconds of silence. No resistance, no words, just breathing and looking into her mind. Tears flowed, but strangely, the argument stopped. The hurtful words were no longer uttered. That marriage was nurtured further thanks to those 10 seconds of silence. Later, she recounted, "That was the first time in my life I knew that silence wasn't admitting defeat, but a way to prevent myself from losing what was truly important." Some ask why things calm down when we are silent. Because every argument is like a boat in a strong current. The harder you try to fight the waves, the more likely the boat is to capsize. But when we stop rowing, when we are silent, the water can naturally guide us in the right direction. Life is the same. Sometimes we don't need to win. Simply stopping is enough. Stopping is not giving up. Stopping is to reassess what is worth holding on to and what can be let go of. The Buddha taught in the Four Noble Truths that the root of suffering is craving, aversion, and delusion. When a person argues, they often carry all three: craving to be right, aversion when others disagree, delusion believing that simply winning will bring happiness. But in reality, in an argument, no matter who wins, both sides lose, because shared happiness has been damaged. Winning or losing is not measured by words, but by peace. Afterwards, if the conversation ends in silence, coldness, in resentment, then no matter how much one has won, one still loses to oneself. The human psyche is truly strange. When angry, we don't want to solve the problem. We just want to protect our ego. The angry mind doesn't need logic. It just needs the other person to be silent or admit fault. But when we push others to their limits, what we often receive in return is not respect, but hurt and distance. The voids in marriages or close relationships don't come from a lack of words, but from a lack of silence to soothe the mind. A person can only listen when their mind feels safe, and no one feels safe amidst yelling or competitiveness. Many psychological studies worldwide also show that feelings of anger only last in the body for about 90 seconds. If we can overcome those 90 seconds without reacting, anger will dissipate on its own. This aligns with the Buddha's teaching from over 2,500 years ago. The mind is like the wind. When you see the wind rise, just observe it, and it will dissipate. If you chase the wind, you will be tired your whole life. Therefore, those who practice always learn to stand still, not to react hastily. That very moment of standing still becomes the key to unlocking peace. Some say that knowing to be silent is knowing how to preserve karma, because anger often leads to harsh speech. And harsh speech is one of the heaviest karmic acts. Karma created by words can damage a relationship for many years. A word once spoken can lead to a lifetime of regret. The Buddha once said, "Before speaking, words are your master. Once spoken, you become their slave." The longer one lives, the more ups and downs one experiences, the more one understands that the power of silence is so great that it can heal a broken heart. Stopping before it's too late is the art of mature conduct when dealing with parents, children, lovers, friends, colleagues. There are countless moments where if we knew to stop, we would avoid countless sufferings. Silence in mindfulness is not avoidance, but sowing seeds of peace. Only when the mind settles can wisdom speak. Only when the mind is no longer agitated can we see what we truly need to hold on to and what we should let go of. A single second of silence can sometimes save a lifetime. Just a little calmness, a little thought, a little love, and we are already very different. Don't let regrettable things happen and then say, "If only." Because in life, who knows how much time we have left to correct mistakes. Practice stopping before it's too late to protect the things we truly love. If today you are tense with someone, try being silent for 10 seconds. If you want to argue, try taking a step back. If you feel a storm brewing in your heart, try looking at your breath. Inhale deeply and silently say in your mind, "I am in pain, but I am calm." Exhale slowly and say, "I choose peace instead of winning or losing." Like this, the angry mind will settle, and wisdom will guide the way. That is not magic, but the art of living for a mature person. In this finite life, there is one thing that the more one matures, the more clearly one sees. The greatest victory is not conquering others, but conquering oneself. Arguments, times when we want to be right, moments when we flare up because we feel insulted or wronged, all these are not as frightening as the ego sitting deep within our minds. That ego can make us sharp in our words, fierce in our emotions, and weary in our souls. Ultimately, the loser is not the one who is slandered, but the one who cannot tame their own mind. When we still want to compete with life, we are not truly free. Only when we are silent do we see that we don't need to prove anything. What needs to be conquered is not the person opposite us, but the ego within that demands to win or lose. Since childhood, we have been taught to be strong, to stand up for ourselves, to claim what we believe is right. But the longer one lives, the more one realizes that strength is not about shouting loudly, nor about resisting at all coitus, but about being serene when misunderstood, smiling when insulted, and maintaining a peaceful mind when others are angry. The true winner is not the one who has the last word, but the one who can be silent before anger without letting their mind be disturbed. Sometimes we don't need to conquer anyone. Conquering ourselves is already a great achievement. In Buddhist teachings, the most difficult place to overcome is not external adversity, but the inner self. The Buddha once taught that conquering 1,000 armies is not equal to conquering oneself. That saying, though seemingly simple, contains an entire journey of practice. The one who knows how to control their mind is the one who has passed through the door of wisdom. And in many cases, that victory begins with 2 words: be silent. Silence is not fear. Silence is understanding. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. When silent, without resentment, without bitterness, when silent to protect one's mind, that is when one is conquering oneself. Silence can be said to exist on 3 levels. The first level is silence out of fear. This is a state many have experienced. Silent because they dare not speak. Silent for fear of being judged, criticized, retaliated against, or even for fear of losing a relationship. This level is not true silence, but only temporary silence due to helplessness or anxiety. The words are not spoken, but the mind within is still struggling, still wanting to retort. The second level is silence out of understanding. This is when a person has become more mature, understanding that it is not always necessary to speak, understanding that everyone has their own suffering. And instead of competing, we choose serenity. The third level is silence out of compassion, silent to keep one's mind pure, silent wishing peace for the other person. Silent because one knows that words can sometimes only cause more pain to others. That is the silence of compassion, of true maturity. That is no longer passive silence, but silence with wisdom. Looking at life, we will see many examples of these 3 levels of silence. In meetings, we see people who are silent out of fear, not daring to express their opinions. There are people who are silent because they know that speaking would only complicate the situation further. And there are also people who are silent to maintain harmony because they don't want to embarrass or hurt others. Though all are silent, each silence carries a different essence. Silent out of fear is when the mind is not strong enough. Silent out of understanding is when the mind has begun to see deeply. Silent out of compassion is when the mind has touched compassion. There is a small story that holds a very big lesson. At a high school, there was a student named Min. Min was a kind boy, but had few friends because of his quiet nature. In class, some students often teased Min, especially when teachers were not present. One day in the schoolyard, as Min was walking past a group of classmates, someone hurled insults at him in front of everyone. Normally, students at this age would react strongly. Just one retort, and a conflict could immediately flare up. But that day, Min just stood still and was silent. He did not react, did not resist, did not retort. The crowd around fell silent because no one thought he would choose that approach. Mr. Hugh, who had witnessed everything, approached, placed a hand on Min's shoulder, and said, just loud enough for him to hear, "You didn't lose to anyone. Today, you conquered yourself." In life, sometimes all we need is one person to understand us like that. That silence was not the silence of fear, but the silence of wisdom and inner strength. Min had chosen to step out of the competitive whirlpool. He did not let anger lead his mind astray. He did not need to prove himself with words. He had conquered himself. Many have wondered if such silence is cowardice. The answer lies in the inner self of the silent person. If silent out of fear, then it is indeed cowardice. But if silent out of understanding, then that is strength. In truth, the more inner strength a person has, the less they use words to defend themselves. They know that silence at the right time is the way to protect their mind from the provocations of others. A person who hears criticism and still maintains a calm mind. That is not weak silence, but courageous silence. Only those who have truly experienced life know that often conquering others is not as difficult as conquering oneself. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught that the one who speaks many words is not necessarily the one who understands the Dharma. The wise person is one who, even if they say nothing, always has a peaceful mind and harms no one. That teaching shows us that true silence is not in the mouth, but in the mind. Silent, but with an angry mind, is not silence. Silent, but with a competitive mind, is not silence. Silent, with a tranquil mind, silent, with a heart full of love, that is the silence of wisdom. When offended, the human psyche typically has two main reactions. One is to resist, meaning to retort to protect oneself. The second is to withdraw, meaning to be silent out of fear. Both can easily lead to harm. But there is a third way. Silence, to listen to oneself. Listen to the pain within. Look back to see why our mind is so easily hurt, and then gradually learn to accept and let go. When we understand our own suffering, we will naturally become gentler with others. Instead of fighting, we choose understanding. Instead of retorting, we choose peace. In spiritual practice, there is a method called contemplation of impermanence. This means that when an angry mind arises, we look directly at it and ask ourselves, will this emotion last forever, or will it pass? When we clearly see that all emotions are just clouds passing across the sky of the mind. We will no longer want to cling to them. When we clearly see that the person offending us is also just a person suffering, we will no longer want to strike back at them. Silence, when one understands the suffering of the other, is the first foundation of compassion. In Buddhist scriptures, this is called joyful detachment and compassion meditation. Compassion is not just giving. It is also knowing how to look at others with understanding eyes. Sometimes, the person who hurts us is precisely the one suffering the most. Sometimes, the person who makes us sad is precisely the one who needs healing. If we respond with anger, we only make the cycle of suffering spin faster. If we respond with silence and serenity, sometimes we are helping that person to stop. A person who knows how to practice is not someone who never gets angry, but someone who knows how to move through anger without letting it control them. A person who knows how to practice is not someone who never encounters difficulties, but someone who knows how to stop when the mind begins to want to compete. Stop to see what is truly important. Stop to conquer oneself. All humans have an instinct to be respected and acknowledged. Being offended is what most powerfully activates that instinct. But that instinct is not destiny. We can learn to move through it with meditation, with mindfulness, with contemplation, and with breath. Every time the angry mind begins to arise, try to breathe deeply and tell yourself silently, "This is just an emotion. It is not me." Exhale slowly and say in your mind, "I am peaceful. I am growing." Practicing like this is not a 1 or 2-day effort, but an entire journey. But that journey is the path to freedom. When we are silent to conquer ourselves, we are sowing good seeds in our consciousness. Those seeds will blossom into inner peace, into compassion in our eyes, and into happiness in our lives. Only when we no longer need to conquer anyone do we truly feel we are living lightly. When we are silent and our heart is at peace, that is when we are truly strong. If you are going through something that makes you want to react, try to stop. If you are misunderstood, try to breathe deeply. If you feel you are about to lose your temper, try to look at what is happening in your mind. If you feel you need to win or lose to protect yourself, try asking yourself if winning will truly bring happiness. Sometimes silence is the answer. Remember that a word spoken can hurt others for many years. A moment of silence can preserve a relationship for a lifetime. Every time you are silent without hurting anyone, you are conquering yourself. And every time you conquer yourself, you are getting closer to the peace you always seek. That is the quiet strength of maturity in this life. It is not always necessary to speak, but one thing is certain. Silence at the right time is the energy of a wise person. Silence in compassion is the light of one who practices, and silence to conquer oneself is the first step to freedom from suffering. There are moments in life when you will realize that silence is not emptiness. Silence is actually full of things that words cannot express. In the silence of the soul, we feel unspoken sorrows, hear hidden sighs, and see tears not yet shed. This life is not just about what we hear, but also about the things no one dares to say. People can hide their exhaustion with a smile, hide their loneliness with a joke, but they cannot hide from a heart that knows how to listen. Such is impermanence. everything is constantly changing. A person happy today may tomorrow feel lost in life. A person living in a seemingly complete family may have hidden wounds in their heart that they cannot share with anyone. Therefore, understanding impermanence also means understanding that everyone in this life needs to be heard and understood. It's just that they don't know how to express it. At such times, silence is the deepest language of love. People often think that to help someone, they need excellent advice, timely encouragement, or even deep psychological knowledge. But sometimes, what others need most is not advice, but just a peaceful space for them to express what they have long held in their hearts. Sometimes, what people need most is not a correct answer, but someone willing to listen with all their heart. We often have a habit of giving advice. When we hear someone recount a sad story, we immediately offer solutions. When we hear someone has a problem, we immediately speak our own thoughts. We rarely stop to ask, "So, what do you want?" Often, we think we are helping others, but in reality, we are imposing our thoughts on them. That makes the listener feel even more lonely, because they realize that no one truly understands them. Advice can make people think, but listening can heal people. In Buddhism, this is called compassionate listening, meaning listening with a compassionate heart, without judgment, without haste, without competitiveness. Listening like a cool stream, so that the suffering person feels their heart refreshed, lightened, and supported. Some people, when hurt, become irritable or completely silent. They are like a closed door that no one can enter. But in truth, behind that door is not coldness, but a heart that has been too afraid. The human psyche is inherently complex. When we are tired, we easily lose our temper. When we are lonely, we easily become so silent that no one realizes we need help. That is how the mind creates a shell to protect itself. At such times, the more outsiders ask, the more they try to analyze. The more they want to know the reason, the more the hurt person withdraws deeper within. At that point, the only thing that can open that door is a silence full of understanding, a gaze that knows how to listen, a peaceful, non-judgmental presence, a heart ready to be there rather than rushing to fix anyone's mistakes. Such deep listening has the power to open people's hearts. That is the wisdom of silence. A wise person is not one who speaks well, but one who knows when to be silent. Like the moon never competes with the sun's light, but at night, it illuminates the souls of countless lost travelers. The moon's silence is nature's understanding. This world is not only beautiful because of the morning bird song, but also because of the gentle stillness when night falls. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught that when we truly listen to others with sincerity, we are sowing seeds of compassion in our own minds. Those seeds will gradually grow with each conversation. Each time we patiently move past our own anger to stay with others in silent understanding. A good doctor not only heals the body, but also helps the patient's soul feel lighter. That is why, in the story of Dr. Lan, people don't remember what medicine she gave her patients, but they remember that she sat silently, allowing the patients to cry, allowing them to speak out what they had long hidden in their hearts. Those patients thought they only needed medicine to live, but in reality, they needed a reason to continue living. The fear of death wasn't because of its coldness, but because of the fear that no one would remember them, that no one would know they ever existed. The fear of lying down one day without someone holding their hand. Dr. Lan didn't say much, just listened, her expression serene, like a riverbank, allowing those tears to flow freely without judgment. That silence was like a miraculous medicine. After that day, the patient began to recover, not just because of the medicine, but because someone had touched the loneliest part of their soul. They no longer had to hide. They had been seen. When people are truly understood, they truly come back to life. In Buddhism, there is a concept called spiritual hearing. It means that only when the mind is silent can we hear the cries for help from others. Hearing not just with our ears, but with our heart. Hearing not to retort, but to see that others are also suffering just like us. When we hear the pain of others, we will stop wanting to compete, stop wanting to argue, stop wanting to assert ourselves, because then we understand that everyone is fighting their own battles in life. An irritable person is not necessarily a bad person. A quiet person is not necessarily someone with nothing to say. A person who laughs often is not necessarily happy. A cheerful person in a crowd might still shed tears when they return to their own room. This shows us that knowing how to listen is the fastest way to learn the lesson of compassion. Every time we open our heart to listen to another person, we learn to live more kindly and benevolently. In the Dhammapada, verse 13 teaches, "Do not respond to evil words with evil words. Be silent, like a broken bell. Even if others insult you, do not be angry." That saying not only teaches us about patience, but also about the power of silence. When we are silent out of understanding, our heart no longer has ripples. We no longer need to defeat others through argument. We choose to win by maintaining peace for our own mind. Sometimes we are silent, not because we lack logic, but because we know that logic does not bring people more peace. Only love can do that. That is why the Buddha taught, "Use compassion to listen." For the suffering often do not speak with logic. They speak with the tears of their soul. The lesson here is that the one in need most is not an answer, but a place to be comforted. The one in need most is not advice, but a listening ear. If in this life you can become someone to whom others dare to recount their sorrows, then you are already walking on the path of compassion. When we know to be silent at the right time, we are creating a space for the other person to breathe freely. When we know how to listen deeply, we are helping them untie knots in their heart without making them feel ashamed. Understanding is the most precious gift we can give someone, because unlike material possessions, it does not fade with time. Understanding changes a life. Understanding allows a person to step out of the depths into the light. That is the miracle of love. So, how can we learn the art of listening and being silent out of love? First, we need to let go of our ego. Don't think that we must have the answer. Don't think that we must help others with something grand. In truth, our peaceful presence is already a great gift. When listening to someone speak, practice listening to their entire story. Before thinking about what you will say, observe their eyes, their voice, and how they breathe. Because between the pauses, there are often invaluable things. We cannot listen when our mind is busy arguing, just as we cannot see the sky when we constantly look down. Listening is not just about external silence, but also about calming our mind internally. When the mind is still, the ears can hear what is unspoken. We should also learn to listen to ourselves. People often live in internal noise, worries, regrets, fears, desires. Those voices exhaust us because we never have a moment of peace. To listen to others, first, we must listen to ourselves. Sit down for a moment, take a long breath, and ask your heart, am I suffering? Do I need someone to listen? Am I running from some emotion? When we can face ourselves, then we are truly capable of listening to others without giving up halfway. That is a practice. It is no coincidence that in Buddhism, there is a meditation practice called listening meditation. Listening to our breath, listening to each heartbeat, listening to the words we haven't dared to speak. That is the foundation of compassion. Practicing silence out of love is not forcing ourselves not to speak, but practicing sowing mindfulness in every word. Before speaking, ask, will these words bring peace to the other person? Will they make them feel lighter? Will they alleviate their suffering? If the answer is no, then silence is the choice of love. If we are silent, but our heart is still full of anger, that is only temporary silence. If we are silent and our heart feels peaceful, that is the silence that changes destiny. When we listen with all our heart, we no longer want to dispute right or wrong. We only want to find a way to live more peacefully together. Such listening brings people closer. A family can avoid many arguments simply by taking a little time to listen to each other. A father who yells less at his children. A wife who complains less about her husband. A friend who judges less. Then the world immediately becomes gentler. Therefore, before someone needs comfort, they need to be heard. Before someone changes, they need to be understood. And before someone's heart can heal, they need to feel that they have a safe place to express their pain. If you can become that peaceful place for others, your life will be filled with meaning. Remember that silence is sometimes the gentlest language of love. This life is like a classroom where everyone is trying to assert themselves. Some seek recognition through money. Some seek praise through compliments. Some diligently throw themselves into the race of winning and losing just to prove to someone that they are skilled, talented, and not inferior to anyone. However, the faster one goes, the more exhausted one becomes. The more one wants to be recognized, the more lonely one feels in one's own life. I once wondered why everyone has to live in a state of constantly striving to be recognized. Why do we always want to compete with others, even though we know that after winning once, we have to keep fighting to win the next time? It's like standing on a mountain peak. The stronger the wind blows, the harder it is to stand still and maintain balance. So, what exactly are we searching for in this impermanent, constantly changing life? I remember once sitting alone on a rainy afternoon, the pitter-patter of rain on the roof evoking an inexplicable sense of emptiness in my heart. I suddenly thought that human life is like a raindrop falling and then dissipating quickly, leaving only faint traces of water on the ground. If life is impermanent, then the struggles of winning and losing are just like a fleeting breeze. Yet, why do we cling to that transience only to be hurt and suffer. Human suffering doesn't just come from failure, poverty, or loneliness. The greatest suffering is when we don't know who we are, so we have to chase after the eyes of others, hoping that someone will recognize us. And in doing so, we almost lose ourselves from the moment we start seeking external validation. If we look through the lens of Buddhist teachings, we will realize that all struggles of winning and losing stem from a single root: the ego. The ego is like a shadow. The more we fear it, the more we try to avoid it, the more it clings to us. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha taught that the source of suffering is craving, aversion, and delusion. One who wants to be superior to others is one who does not fully trust themselves. One who is easily offended is one who fears they are insignificant. One who finds it difficult to accept constructive criticism is one who fears being judged as inferior. All these are manifestations of the ego. As the ego grows larger, the image of oneself in the mind becomes more easily hurt. And at that point, we don't live for joy. We live to defend ourselves. Just one contemptuous glance is enough to make us uncomfortable. Just one disagreeable word is enough to irritate us. We live like a warrior, constantly bracing themselves, unable to relax. So is that living, or just trying to survive? Society today creates many races that make people believe they must win or lose to be considered successful. From childhood, we are taught to be at the top of the class. As adults, we have to find ways to assert our position at work. In society, we compare our cars, our houses, or our professions. Two children playing together don't care much about status or money. But as they grow up, people start scrutinizing each other, asking if the other person is better than them. And from that, a fear is born. Fear of being inferior, fear of being left behind, fear of not being good enough. And the more we fear, the more easily we fall into the state of having to prove that we are better than others. But the very moment we try to prove ourselves is also the moment we lose true inner peace. The Buddha taught that the ego is like a cramped room. If we cling tightly to everything for fear of being abandoned, for fear of being disrespected, then that room will quickly become stifling. A person with a spacious mind, even living in a small house, will still feel comfortable. A person with a narrow mind, even living in a palace, will still feel confined. The mind determines the quality of life, not circumstances. Some people drive old cars, but are happy because they know contentment. Some are wealthy, but cannot sleep peacefully for fear of losing their status. Some have nothing in hand, but still wear a serene smile because they don't have to compete with anyone. One suffers not from lacking much. One suffers because the mind is not steadfast enough to stop the game of winning and losing. In other words, the one who suffers is the one who still believes they must prove themselves to be loved. And that is also when we must return to the most important question: who are we really? As you go through the ups and downs of life, you will realize that the most important thing is not how much money you have, how many people praise you, or how much fame you possess. The most important thing is whether you live true to yourself. If every day you live with a different face to please others, then you are drifting away from yourself, little by little. You may receive applause from everyone, but when night falls, you feel empty, like a hollow shell that does not belong to you. And so, you win a lot, but you lose yourself. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught that conquering 1,000 enemy armies is not equal to conquering oneself. That teaching is simple, yet contains immense healing power. People always want to conquer others, but rarely conquer themselves. We easily argue, but find it difficult to apologize. We easily blame loved ones, but find it difficult to understand their feelings. We easily demand that others conform to our wishes, but find it difficult to look at ourselves to see if we are truly right. It is precisely because of this that relationships gradually fracture. Family, which is supposed to be a peaceful place, gradually turns into a battleground. Logic sometimes wins, but affection loses. If we are a little more silent, listen a little more, and are a little gentler, then we can see what our loved ones need more than competitiveness. I remember the story of Mr. Kwan. He lived simply and rarely followed trends. All his friends bought new cars, but he still rode his old motorcycle, which was over 10 years old. One day, someone asked him why he didn't get a new car to look more stylish. He just smiled and replied, "I don't need to prove anything anymore." That statement made many people silent because they had never thought that not proving anything could also be a beautiful way of life. A person who no longer needs to prove themselves is someone who clearly knows who they are. In Buddhism, when the mind is firm and no longer swayed by the opinions of others, that is when we begin the journey of true freedom. Freedom is not just about not being physically bound, but about not being bound by the opinions of others. Perhaps what exhausts people the most is not hard work, but the fear of being underestimated. People are truly strong only when they are no longer afraid of judgment. The wise will understand that praise or criticism are just like fleeting winds. They come and go, not worth holding on to. A true practitioner will not care whether others recognize them or not, but will simply do what is right. One who knows who they are doesn't need to make others recognize them. The person who doesn't need to prove anything is truly the strongest, because, as the Buddha taught, life is impermanent. The human mind changes every moment. Praise or criticism today can vanish tomorrow. If we rely on external things to feel our self-worth, then we are sowing the seeds of suffering for ourselves. Sit for a moment and look into your mind. I believe everyone will eventually realize that they once competed with others only because of a lack of self-confidence. This helps us understand that only when we appreciate ourselves do we no longer need to seek external validation. Mindfulness is a mirror that reflects the mind. If our heart is still full of anger and competitiveness, then our self-image will be one of perpetual weariness. But if our heart knows to stop, then we can see that stability is still there, waiting for us to realize it. When we understand who we are, we will choose a peaceful way of life. That peace comes from not having to prove anything. We no longer ask what others think of us, but we ask ourselves what we think of ourselves. We no longer chase after fame, but we direct our minds towards inner steadfastness. We no longer argue to win, but we choose to listen to understand. then silence is no longer weakness. Letting go is no longer defeat. Acceptance is no longer failure. But all of them are ways for us to return to ourselves, to live truly, kindly, and peacefully. As the Buddha taught, if we know who we are, we don't need anyone else's recognition. This life sometimes only requires us to take one step back, and the sky will open wider. Humans can travel to the ends of the world, but they can never step beyond themselves. The more places we go, the more we see that the external world is not so vast. It is the inner world that is the largest, yet also the most challenging to conquer. Every day, we step out and encounter countless different faces, but in truth, the face we encounter most often is our own, with all its thoughts of right and wrong, ego, competitiveness, and tiny moments of anger that are enough to disturb the mind. Impermanence always arrives silently, like a gentle breeze. We cannot know when a word will hurt someone. We also cannot know which moment we accidentally sow a negative karma. But there is one thing we always have the power to choose silence, to stop the path of creating karma. A Zen master once said, "People suffer not because of what happens to them, but because of how they react to those things." Every time we argue, every time we defend ourselves, every time we flare up in anger to prove we are right, that is every time we are creating new karma. Karma is not something mystical or distant. Karma is precisely the angry thoughts we nourish within our hearts, the words we speak that hurt others, the impulsive actions that we later look back on with regret. In that moment, if we had chosen silence, would everything have been different? Silence is not weakness. Silence is not to be trampled upon by others. Silence is that we are mindful enough to know that if we speak one word, it will become wrong. If we add one more word, we will only invite suffering. Silence is wisdom, a kind of courage, a way to preserve blessings within our own minds. Many hear the words silence and immediately think of disadvantage. They think silence is cowardly, fearful, or falling behind others. But there are those who are silent because their minds have seen clearly, have understood that there is no need to compete with life anymore. What is gained by winning an argument? If we win against someone, we might be happy for a moment, but if we lose to ourselves, we will never be at peace. According to Buddhist teachings, when we are angry, when the mind of aversion arises, that is when the mind is most likely to create karma. Every argument is an arrow. Every thoughtless word is an invisible dagger stabbing into the heart of another. But when we are silent, we are stopping the flow of karma. Silent to keep the mind undisturbed. Silent so the prune of anger does not flare up. Silent so as not to create more negative seeds for the future. Someone asked, "Is patience just enduring?" In truth, patience isn't about losing to them, but about not losing to ourselves. The one who knows patience is protecting their own mind. The one who knows silence is preserving blessings. Every time a conflict occurs, our mind is like a lake into which a small stone has been thrown. It ripples, it forms waves, it stirs up the deepest things in our heart. If we react immediately, we are letting that stone continue to stir more strongly. But if we are willing to stand still and be silent, that lake will naturally settle. The human mind is the same. Some angers will pass, some resentments will fade. We just need to not add fuel to the fire. Our ancestors used to teach that one moment of patience brings 9 blessings. Sometimes, just a short sentence can cause 2 people to drift apart for a lifetime. Sometimes, a casual joke of ours can become a deep wound in someone's heart. We don't remember what we said, but the other person suffers for a lifetime. Karma isn't found in grand gestures. Karma lies deep within every small action, and silence is the way to prevent negative seeds from being sown. In this society, people always try to win, to be superior, to prove themselves. Some want to win in arguments. Some want to win in love. Some want to win at work. But how many understand that winning too much can sometimes be a kind of loss? Many can silence others, but few can silence themselves. Many can make others tremble in fear, but few dare to look deep into their own minds. Conquering others might be powerful, but conquering oneself is truly the mark of a wise person. There's a story that makes many people ponder every time it's told. The story of Mr. Lamb, an ordinary man in a small rural area. One morning, in a crowded market, he was buying some vegetables for his wife to cook for dinner, when a stranger suddenly started shouting and cursing at him terribly. Everyone around looked at him, waiting for him to react, waiting for him to argue back, waiting for him to get angry. But Mr. Lamb didn't say a word. He just smiled gently. The other person cursed for a while, then walked away with confusion in his eyes. Afterwards, someone asked Mr. Lamb, "Why did you put up with that?" He replied, "If I had retorted, I would be just like him." Then, some time later, the other person came to apologize to him. They said, "That day I was so stressed. Many family matters made me irritable, but you didn't react, which made me feel ashamed and rethink things. Thanks to your silence, I knew I had to change." That simple story shows us that sometimes just a calm mind amidst the noisy worldly market is enough to create a change. It's not always necessary to speak for others to understand us. It's not always necessary to prove ourselves for others to recognize us. When our mind is naturally calm, everything around us also settles. When we know to stop, we won't create new karma. And when new karma isn't created, old karma will naturally dissolve over time. In the Dhammapada, there is a verse, "Hatred cannot be extinguished by hatred. Only love can extinguish hatred." This speaks not only of forgiveness, but also of the power of silence and compassion. When we are silent with someone who is angry, we are giving them a chance to rethink. When we are silent with someone who is suffering, we are giving them peace. Silence is a way to help others' minds settle, and also a way to help our own mind return to mindfulness. Modern science also indicates that when people are angry, the part of the brain that processes reason is almost neutralized. People easily act instinctively and speak thoughtlessly. In such moments, people don't need logic. They just need to calm down. If we argue, we create new karma. If we are silent, we stop old karma. Patience is not about losing, but about conquering oneself. And the most important thing is that silence is not because we are afraid, but because we understand that everything is in a state of impermanence. Anger will pass, pain will end. But if we can maintain a peaceful mind, tomorrow will be much lighter. Someone once shared that during an argument with their mother, they accidentally said something that upset their mother for many days. When they calmed down, they felt immense regret. They said, "If only I had known to be silent then, I wouldn't have to regret it today." Indeed, sometimes people only regret having said too much, but rarely does anyone regret having been silent. Words, once uttered, can make a heart grow cold, but silence can sometimes be warmer than any words. In Buddhism, there is a practice called the perfection of patience. This means patience stemming from wisdom, not patience out of fear of others, but understanding the impermanent nature of all insults. The Buddha taught that when someone insults us, if we do not accept it, those words will return to them. Like a person who throws a ball against a wall, the ball bounces back. Silence before anger is not yielding, but a way for karma to find no foothold. Karma can only grow when there is a reaction from us. But if our mind does not arise in kind, karma will naturally dissipate like a fire starved of oxygen. Therefore, every time we get angry, ask ourselves one question. In this moment, do I want to create more karma or resolve karma? Every time we argue, stop for a moment, breathe deeply, and see where our mind is heading. If our mind wants to compete, know that karma is being sown. If our mind realizes it is being impulsive and we choose silence, then at that very moment, karma is gradually being resolved. Each time we are silent is a time we are rebuilding the foundation of peace for our lives. Then one day, we will realize that silence is not emptiness. Silence is where the mind is reborn. As it has been said, not all voices are expressed in words. There are understandings, loves, and tolerances that can only be heard by the heart, and the heart can only hear most clearly when the mind has settled. If you are going through a difficult period, if 1,000 angry sounds are in your head, if an inexpressible pain is in your heart, try taking a step back. Sit down peacefully. Let all sounds subside. Let all thoughts pass like drifting clouds. Just be silent. Let your mind settle. Then you will see that behind every anger, behind every insult, behind every gossip, there is a peaceful sky always waiting for you to return. And when you are truly silent, old karma will gradually be resolved, like a gentle rain in a dry season. It doesn't come loudly, but it's enough to refresh the whole soul. There are loud thunderclaps outside that startle us with fear. But it is the silence of heaven and earth after the rain that brings the greatest peace to the human heart. This life is also like that. Amidst so many worries, amidst the noises of earning a living, the place most in need of stillness is not a high mountain peak or a deep forest, but the home we live in. A family home doesn't need much material wealth. A family home is mainly built with understanding and the careful preservation of every word. Yet, the most difficult thing in a family is not working hard to earn money, but knowing when to be silent at the right time to preserve love. In life, we often rush into society with a readiness to fight. Out there are marketplaces, competition, the voice of reason. But when we return home, we forget that this is no longer a place for winning or losing. Family is not a battlefield for competition, but a place for people to find peace after being exhausted by life. But often, it is within the family that we argue the most, because we no longer maintain mindfulness. Everyone has their own rightness, so everyone wants to speak. But few are willing to listen. Everyone carries the weariness of a long day, so everyone is easily irritable. But few are willing to be silent to let anger subside, and gradually, unspoken love fades, while wounds are inflicted abundantly. Someone once asked a Zen master why couples who love each other very much also argue a lot. The Zen master smiled and said, "Because when people are in love, they want the other person to understand them. But if you only want others to understand you, there will come a time when you forget that you also need to learn to understand them." When two people both speak, words will clash. Only when one person is silent to listen can love speak. In Buddhism, it is taught that the consequences of words can sometimes be greater than an action. A slap can hurt a person for a moment, but a cold word can freeze a person's heart for a lifetime. Therefore, letting go in a family sometimes means letting go of competitiveness. Being silent at the right time is not weakness, but intelligence. The one who wants to have the last word is often not the winner, but the one who needs to be heard. And the one who chooses silence first is often the one who loves more. If one of the two is willing to take a step back, the door to happiness will open wider. A happy home always needs space for silence. Not silence out of indifference, but silence to have enough time to see deeply into the emotions of the one you love. For couples, it is often not about who is right or wrong, but about a heart yearning to be understood. With children, silence is often not indifference, but an opportunity for parents to learn how to listen. The older people get, the more they want to speak. But the more wounded their inner self is, the harder it is to express. Children don't speak out because they don't know how to express their emotions. Adults don't speak out for fear of being judged. The elderly don't speak out for fear of burdening their children and grandchildren. So sometimes, silence is the only thing each person can do to protect their heart. But there's another kind of silence, the silence of understanding. Not silence to ignore, but silence because one knows that speaking at this moment would only cause more pain to the other person. That is the silence of a heart that knows how to listen. The wife is silent when she sees her husband is too tired. The husband is silent when he knows his wife feels hurt. Parents are silent when they look into their child's sad eyes. If such silences come at the right time, they can save an entire home from breaking apart. In psychology, this is called listening with the heart. When someone is suffering, what they need is not judgment, not advice like cheer up or it's okay. What they need is the complete presence of someone willing to sit quietly beside them and not judge. When a person is in pain, their mind is very fragile. Sad eyes are a cry for help. Their silence is a sign that they need to be embraced. If we scold them at that moment, we will unknowingly close the door that is waiting for us to open and step into their heart. There is a story that makes many people ponder when they hear it. It is the story of Mrs. Tui and her small son. One late afternoon weekend, her son came home from school with a heavy face, holding a test paper with a score so low that it made a mother like her feel angry and disappointed. Normally, she would scold her son immediately, but that day, she noticed her son's eyes were not like usual. Those eyes were deeply sad and a little frightened. She suddenly felt that something was wrong. She intended to get angry, but then she sighed gently. Instead of scolding, she silently pulled up a chair and sat next to her son. She said nothing for a few minutes, just looked at her son and gently asked, "Are you sad?" The boy burst into tears. He said he had tried so hard. "Mom, I studied until late at night. I did my best, but my grade is still bad, so I feel like a failure. I'm afraid you'll be sad. I'm afraid Dad will scold me. I know I've disappointed the whole family." It turned out that behind that low grade was not laziness, but a silent effort. Her son's tears made her feel heartache. The scolding she had intended to utter turned into a tight hug. That day, she didn't teach her son a lesson from textbooks, but taught him a lesson about understanding and love. That story makes us realize that in a family, sometimes silence at the right time is the language of love. If Mrs. Tui had raised her voice at that moment, her son's sadness would have become a wound. But because she was silent and listened, that sadness became an opportunity for mother and son to understand each other better. A small story, but a big lesson on how to love in silence. That story also shows us the power of presence. Happiness sometimes doesn't need many words. It just needs someone willing to be silent to listen to our heart. The Buddha taught that listening is the gift of compassion. Listening not just with our ears, but with our heart. The Anguttara Nikaya states, "One who knows how to listen will understand. One who understands will love." Therefore, silence in a family is not isolation, but a way to open the door to others' inner worlds. Everyone in the family needs a place to lean on. Parents need respect. Children need to be heard. Wives need attention. Husbands need understanding. When one person talks too much, the other will try to be silent to protect themselves. But if we are silent out of love for the other person more than ourselves, then that silence will become healing. In a Dharma talk, Thich Nhat Hanh once said something that awakened many people. He said, "Don't try to be perfect in the eyes of strangers, only to become careless within your family." In society, we can be polite and smile, but at home, we are ready to get angry with loved ones over a small matter. Ultimately, we offer smiles to outsiders, but leave tension within the family. Sometimes people are silent, not because they no longer love, but because their hearts hold too many unspoken things. A wise person is one who knows when to speak and when to be silent. The Buddha once taught that when anger arises, words become a sharp knife. If we speak at that moment, we will unknowingly sow more negative karma. In the Sammanaphala Sutta, the Buddha taught that a word spoken without consideration can cause greater damage than a thunderstorm. Therefore, in a family, knowing when to be silent is preserving the home. Silent to let the other person's heart calm down. Silent to ignite understanding. And silent so that love has a chance to blossom. If you have ever experienced a family meal where no one spoke, you will understand how heavy that silence can be. But if you have experienced a moment of silence when a loved one was suffering, and you gently took their hand, then you will understand that there are silences that don't create distance, but create very deep connections. Everyone in the family is silently fighting their own worries. Children fear being judged. Wives fear not being understood. Husbands fear not being good enough. Parents fear their children's failure. If everyone speaks, who will listen? If everyone competes, who will heal each other? The more one matures, the more one realizes that silence at the right time can save many things. Sometimes, the person who loves us most is the one who is silent when we are most angry. Sometimes, the person who needs us most is the one who says nothing. Try to look deep into the eyes of your family members. If you pay close attention, you will see some glances waiting for you to ask if they are okay. Some eyes want to say, "I'm so tired, Mom." Some eyes want to say, "I'm scared too. I'm not always strong." Some eyes want a word of encouragement, but don't know how to ask for it. If we know how to be silent and listen with our heart, we will hear many unspoken words. And that is love. Love is not about talking a lot. Love is knowing when to be silent. Love is knowing how to reconcile through listening. Love is knowing how to embrace others without many words. People may forget what we say, but they will remember how we made them feel. A family that maintains silence at the right time will avoid many wounds. Silence is a bridge. Silence is a way to preserve blessings. Silence is the most precious gift we can give to loved ones when they are grieving. If you are in a family with many arguments, try bringing silence back. When others are angry, don't get angry with them. When others speak loudly, don't try to speak louder. Breathe deeply and choose silence for a moment. You might just see a miracle happen. Then one day, you will realize that silence is not retreat, but the first step for love to return. A peaceful home is not a place without arguments, but a place where people know how to stop before harm begins. And it is from those moments of stillness that we understand that amidst this impermanent life, there is a place that, if we know how to preserve it, will always be a place we can return to. That is our family home. A place that doesn't need logic, only love. A place that doesn't need competitiveness, only understanding. A place that doesn't need many words, just one person willing to be silent at the right time to hear the heart of the one they love. Have you ever wondered why, living in a life full of noise, struggle, and pressure, some people always maintain their serenity, while others are disturbed all day by just a harsh word, a criticism, or an unkind look? In truth, the outside world is like a vast river that will not wait for anyone and will not subside for anyone. However, our own mind can choose to be calm right amidst that current of life. It's like standing on the bank of a river. You can see the turbulent waves, but deep beneath the riverbed, it is utterly still and peaceful. The mind of a mindful person is also like that. Externally, many changes may occur, but in its depths, that mind maintains a peaceful sky. That is why the ancients often said, to preserve the peace of life, one must first find peace within oneself. This life is inherently impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. Happiness will change. Suffering will also pass. Looking back at the years you've lived, you will realize there were things that once caused you extreme heartbreak. But remembering them today, they are just old stories. There were people who once made you angry, but now, looking back, your heart only holds compassion. That shows us a great truth. All emotions can change. All afflictions can be resolved if we are mindful enough to recognize their nature. In Buddhism, that is called mindfulness, which is the ability to clearly perceive feelings in our mind without chasing after them, without judging, without resisting, just gently observing them and letting them arise and cease on their own. Mindfulness is not a way to escape, but the ability to return to living authentically with oneself in the present moment. Society today constantly pushes people to chase after busyness. People seek success, but sometimes lose their peace. They try to speak more, assert themselves more, argue more, but cannot hear their inner voice. Sometimes that very noise makes us distant from our souls. Car horns, work pressures, comparisons, judgments, all make our minds heavier each day. We are tired, but don't know how to rest. We are in pain, but don't know how to heal. Because we think we must be strong and keep moving forward. However, a mind without mindfulness is like a garden lacking care, gradually becoming barren and exhausted before one knows it. The Buddha taught that if the body is still, the mouth will be still. If the mouth is still, the mind will be still. When the mind is still, wisdom arises. That is the path that Zen masters have traveled, and also the way that ordinary people like us can apply every day. Mindfulness does not require you to abandon the world, nor do you need to sit on a high mountain or enter a deep temple. Mindfulness is present the moment you inhale and know you are inhaling. You exhale and know you are exhaling. When the mind has the ability to truly perceive, your mind itself becomes a refuge. Amidst a constantly changing world, you can still grasp your own hand and know that you are still at peace. In modern psychology, mindfulness is considered a method for restoring mental health. Many people treating depression, anxiety, insomnia, and psychological trauma have found clarity by practicing mindfulness every day. They start by sitting quietly for 5 minutes, breathing slowly, and focusing only on their breath. The longer they practice, the more clearly they feel their mind relaxing. Negative emotions gradually dissipate. Pressures lighten, as if laid down. When a person knows how to stop, their mind will return to its inherent peaceful state. Mindfulness helps them see deeper into the truth. Those worries only exist in thoughts, not as the nature of life. That is also what the Buddha once taught. Suffering comes from clinging, and peace comes when the mind knows how to let go gently. Mindfulness is not escaping life, but living amidst life while maintaining a peaceful mind. Meditation is not a way to run away from the currents of life, but a way to learn how to swim in the currents of life gently. You may be working, but you can still breathe in mindfulness. You may encounter sadness, but you can still calmly acknowledge your emotions. You may be misunderstood, but you can still choose to keep your heart at peace. When practicing mindfulness, you are not trying to create peace, but you are simply returning to the peace that is already inherent in everyone's mind. That is also what Zen masters call returning home, returning to a place you once had, but had long forgotten. I want to tell you a story that made me ponder a lot about the power of mindfulness. At a very noisy bus station, where everyone was rushing, where the air was thick with car horns and people arguing, there was a man named Hao, a truck driver. Every time he waited to load cargo, he would sit down in a small corner amidst that crowded bus station, close his eyes, and breathe deeply. He didn't run away from the noise. He didn't seek a quiet place, nor did he blame life. He just quietly breathed. He breathed as if that was how he returned to himself after long hours of driving through the night. People once asked him how he could remain calm in such chaos. He simply said that when he meditated, he didn't try to eliminate the noise. He just breathed and accepted everything as it was. The car horns were still there, but his mind was as silent as if no noise had ever appeared. After hearing that story, I suddenly realized that peace is not a place without storms. Peace is when the mind is not swept away by the storms. Mindfulness helps people not lose themselves amidst the noises of life. Like a lotus leaf in a pond, no matter how murky the water around it, the lotus leaf remains pure amidst a world full of struggle. One who knows how to return to their mind still maintains the light in their heart. That prompts us to ask how many times we have allowed external things to control our minds. Sometimes, just one disagreeable word can bother us all day. Sometimes, an unkind glance can hurt us. But if we know how to breathe in mindfulness, we will see that those emotions are just small, fleeting waves. We don't need to avoid them, nor do we need to resist them. We just need to observe them, like clouds passing across the sky. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught about practicing mindfulness through 4 methods: contemplation of the body, contemplation of feelings, contemplation of the mind, and contemplation of mental qualities. These methods help practitioners clearly see the nature of all phenomena. Beings suffer because they mistake emotions for themselves, because they think thoughts are reality. But mindfulness helps us understand that everything is changing every second, every minute. No emotion is fixed. No joy lasts forever. No suffering cannot pass. When we clearly see the nature of impermanence, our mind naturally lightens. We no longer cling. We know how to put down the accumulated thoughts in our hearts. From there, we begin to live slower, deeper, and more peacefully. If you ask how to apply mindfulness in daily life, you don't need to change too many things. Every morning when you wake up, you just need to spend a minute breathing and acknowledging that you are still alive today. When you eat a meal, you just need to clearly perceive the taste of the food and thank life for that meal. When you walk on the street, you just need to pay attention to your footsteps, feeling your feet touching the ground. Mindfulness appears in every small action like that. The mindful mind does not wait until you sit in meditation on a mountain or enter a meditation hall. The mindful mind is always in every breath, every step, every emotion you perceive. When you are near family members, you can also practice mindfulness. Before saying a harsh word, take a long breath. Before reacting to someone, try to listen to your inner emotions. When we clearly see that our mind is getting angry, we will naturally know how to stop. Because when we are aware of emotions, we are no longer controlled by them. That is how we maintain peace amidst seemingly complex relationships. Just like a leaf cannot choose the direction of the wind, but can choose how to turn itself so as not to be swept away by the wind. Mindfulness also helps us understand that life doesn't always require strength. Sometimes we just need to be mindful enough to know we are weak, calm enough to know we need to rest. When the mind knows to stop, it will naturally recover. In those moments, we will feel our heart soften, and the light of understanding will begin to appear. The Buddha taught that a wise person is one who knows when to stop at the right time. Amidst chaos, if we can hold on to one mindful breath, we still have a path to return. Mindfulness is not magic that erases all suffering, but a lamp that illuminates the way, helping us understand the nature of suffering and overcome it with inner peace. If every day we spend a few minutes sitting still, breathing, listening to our heart, then no matter how many challenges life brings, we will not lose our direction. When the mind has a refuge, no matter how heavy life is, it will no longer make us despair. If you know how to return to yourself through each breath, you will see your mind settle like a still lake, and the light of wisdom will begin to appear. That is the moment people understand that silence is not weakness, but the foundation of strength, the door that brings us back to the mindfulness and peace that have long been inherent. When mindfulness is present, life becomes clearer and more profound. We still live amidst the currents of life, but our mind no longer drifts along with it. And that is the path that the wise choose to walk, the path of understanding and of a peaceful heart. Perhaps all of us wish for a smooth, warm, peaceful life without storms or worries. Deep in our hearts, everyone wishes that one day everything will be perfect. Stable work, harmonious family, understanding loved ones, no one hurting us anymore. However, according to the law of impermanence in life, things never happen exactly as we wish. The more we hope for peace, sometimes the more storms we encounter. The more we want to keep everything intact, the more we feel we lose it. And then we keep asking ourselves, why is my life so full of suffering? Why are others peaceful, despite difficulties? And I am not. But Buddhist teachings say that suffering is not a punishment. Suffering is an invitation for us to awaken. No one in life has ever grown from easy things. Just like the lotus, it only blossoms most beautifully when born from mud. No mud, no lotus, no suffering, no growth. All things in heaven and earth operate according to the law of cause and effect. If you sow, you will reap. If you stumble, you will learn how to get up. Silence in the face of adversity is not weakness, and certainly not escape. Silence is the first step of wisdom. It is when we stop resisting life and begin to listen to ourselves. When we were young, everyone thought their parents were strong. Only when we mature do we understand that they went through a lot of pain that they couldn't express. They were silent, not because they didn't feel pain, but because they knew that some things didn't need to be fought over. What is needed is to learn how to overcome it. According to Buddhist teachings, suffering is the first truth in the Four Noble Truths. That is the first truth, the truth of suffering. Humans are born into this world already carrying the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Suffering of the body, suffering of the mind, suffering from disappointment, suffering from unfulfilled desires. And it is because of suffering that people begin to seek liberation. If a person had never suffered, they would not know what enlightenment is. Only when we stumble do we look back at our footsteps. Only when we lose do we learn to appreciate what we have. A person who lives too easily will never understand the depth of life. They see everything with momentary emotions. Only when in extreme pain do people learn to see life with wisdom. Many often ask if there is a way to avoid adversity. But if life were only favorable, perhaps people would no longer have the motivation to change themselves. Just like a precious gem, before it is polished, it is still rough. The Buddha taught that a gem unpolished will not shine. A person who does not suffer will not achieve. Difficulties do not come to kill us, but to temper us. But in the most painful moments, people often sink into a feeling of loneliness. They think they are the most unfortunate beings in the world. No one understands, no one loves, no one empathizes. This very mindset causes us to create more suffering for ourselves. The more we resist reality, the more exhausted we become. The more we run from suffering, the more it clings to us. The only way to move through it is to face it with stillness, listen to the pain, and then let it go. The ancients said, when the mind is at peace, the surroundings are also at peace. Life does not hold as much suffering as we think. It's just that our mind is not yet peaceful enough to accept everything with an open perspective. When a person harbors resentment, asking, "Why did this happen to me?" then suffering grows. But if they change the question to, "What is this situation teaching me?" then everything begins to change. We start to see that adversity is not an enemy, but a silent teacher. There is a story many in the Mekong Delta still share. The story of Uncle Tam, a lottery ticket vendor. He had only one leg, but always smiled, as if his entire life had never known hardship. Uncle Tam was once a strong construction worker, working all day without getting tired. Then, a sudden accident occurred. A concrete block fell. Uncle Tam lost a leg, lost his job, lost his unfinished future. In the first few months, Uncle Tam didn't talk to anyone. He just sat looking out at the road, seeing people walk normally, seeing children run and play, seeing young people go to work. He looked and remembered the leg that had once carried him through life. On cold, windy nights, Uncle Tam stayed awake. He asked the heavens, "Why did you take so much from me?" But the heavens did not answer, just as life does not always have an answer for everything. Then one day, Uncle Tam went to town and bought a stack of lottery tickets. From then on, he went everywhere selling tickets. People felt for him. People bought to help him. But what everyone remembered about him was Uncle Tam's smile, a smile always present on his lips. Someone asked him, "You lost a leg, so how can you still be so cheerful?" Uncle Tam simply replied calmly, "I lost one leg, but I still have the whole sky." The words were so gentle, yet they resonated deep within the listener's heart. It's true. There are many things we still possess, but because we only look at what is lost, we live in torment. Many people are much more fortunate than Uncle Tam, but they cannot smile like him. A person who fails in a startup often loses faith. A person who just broke up often thinks love in life is just an illusion. A person who experiences family tragedy often sees life as nothing but injustice. But if they understand the Buddha's teaching that everything is interconnected by cause and condition, when conditions are sufficient, things come together. When conditions cease, they fall apart. When karma ripens, things are achieved. When karma is not yet ripe, one waits. They will feel lighter. Suffering does not come to destroy us. It comes to awaken us from the illusion that life is all rosy. When a storm comes, a tree cannot run away, but must cling deep to the earth to stand firm. Humans are also like that. Only when we encounter adverse conditions do we realize how strong we can be. The treasury of Buddhist teachings has also repeatedly reminded us that the wound is where the light can enter. When our heart breaks from suffering, that is also when there is space for the light of wisdom and compassion to enter. One who has experienced suffering, if they know how to be silent to observe their mind, will become more understanding, more compassionate, more empathetic, and more sharing. A heart that has suffered is capable of healing the hearts of others. That is the process of transforming suffering into the energy of practice. When we understand this, we naturally no longer blame adversity. We begin to be grateful because it helps us grow. In Buddhist scriptures, there is a saying that adversity is an opportunity for practice, and favorable conditions are a reward. When we succeed, we easily become complacent. When we are loved, we easily become dependent. But when we feel lost in life, we begin to look deep within, asking, who am I in this world? Where am I going? What is the meaning of life? It is these questions that awaken the spirit, awaken wisdom. A practitioner does not fear suffering, only fears that their mind is not vast enough to pass through suffering. A storm comes not to bury the ground, but to purify what is too weak. A pain comes not to kill the heart, but to test if it truly knows how to love. One who knows how to be silent in the face of adversity. That is the beginning of awakening. Silent to observe the breath, to appreciate every moment of being alive. Silent to hear the inner voice saying that we can still do something good for this life. Silent so as not to turn adversity into anger. Silent so that suffering does not become resentment. Silence is not the loss of a voice, but the preservation of the soul, the flame of faith, the warmth of love. The ancients said, practicing in favorable conditions is easy. Practicing in adverse conditions is true practice. If one day you find yourself at a crossroads in life, vague and floundering, not knowing which way to go, please remember that this is life's invitation for you to stop, to look within yourself. Don't blame, don't run. Take a deep breath. Realize that you are still alive, still able to move forward. The more peaceful the mind, the more opportunities suffering has to transform into wisdom. In the moment you understand that adversity is not punishment, but a silent teacher, you have traveled halfway on the path to enlightenment. The other half is how we live after understanding that. Live without resentment, without anger. Live with a heart vast enough to thank adverse conditions for helping us grow. And then, one day, you will realize that all the upheavals that once made you cry are precisely the things that help you smile today. Because deep down, suffering does not come to kill us, but to teach us to be strong. In this life, everyone hopes to live optimistically, keep a smile on their face, and believe that tomorrow will be better than today. But in reality, many people misunderstand optimism. They think that optimism means always smiling, always appearing strong, always pretending they have never suffered. They try to suppress tears, try to pretend that everything is fine, but the harder they try to forget suffering, the heavier their mind becomes. The more they run from true emotions, the more disconnected they become from themselves. And then, one day, when their endurance reaches its limit, the pain bursts forth, and they realize that they were not optimistic at all, but just trying to appear strong. True optimism is not escaping suffering, but knowing how to fully live with the pain, and then emerge from it with a more peaceful mind than before. If we look deeply into the principle of impermanence, we will see that no one lives forever with joy, nor does anyone sink forever in suffering. Like the sky after a rain, the clouds are still there, but the sun has peeked through. Suffering is not born to drag us down. It is born to help us understand ourselves. Therefore, a truly optimistic person is not one who has never suffered, but one who has experienced suffering, but does not let it consume their soul. There is a beautiful saying: optimism is not seeing everything through rose-tinted glasses, but seeing even wounds with gentle eyes. When the mind is peaceful enough to look directly at reality, no matter how painful that reality may be, we can still breathe gently and say, "At least I'm still alive. And if I'm still alive, I can still change." That is the spirit that Buddhist teachings call mindfulness. Mindfulness helps us not fall into despair, nor run from reality. Mindfulness is seeing things as they are, without judgment, without labeling, just quietly observing and acknowledging. In Buddhist teachings, the reason people suffer is not because of circumstances, but because of how our mind reacts to circumstances. When we ask, "Why me?" we have built a wall between ourselves and reality. But when we dare to ask, "What is this teaching me?" then immediately that wall turns into an open door. The way we ask questions determines the direction of our life. An angry mind will lead us to suffering. A resentful mind will lead us to despair. But a grateful mind will lead us to transformation. One who is grateful for adversity will realize that everything that comes into life carries a purpose. It's just whether we are calm enough to realize it. Many people, when faced with a crisis, often fall into a state of psychological breakdown. They feel helpless. They feel life is unfair. They feel left behind. But precisely then is when silence is most needed. Silence not to act on momentary emotions. Silence to listen to the mind. Silence to observe every thought that passes without hastily believing them. It is said that sometimes silence is also a kind of wisdom, because only in silence do we clearly see the truth. And the truth is that no pain lasts forever. It's just that when our mind is unwilling to let go, it remains. Suffering is like a guest who comes and goes. Only when we treat it as the master of our lives does it exhaust us. Optimism isn't about running away from pain, but saying goodbye to it at the right time, like a visiting guest. When the connection ends, smile and see them off. The story of Ms. Chi is a very true example of this. When she was young, Ms. Chi was healthy and full of zest for life. She worked as a teacher, teaching every day with gentle joy as she watched her students grow. But when she was almost 40, The doctor told her she had cancer. From that moment, everything around her seemed to collapse. In the first few months, all she could do was cry. She looked in the mirror and asked, "Why me? What did I do wrong to deserve this?" Each time, she felt incredibly small and weak. She felt time was an enemy, felt the future was just a dark, murky void. During treatment nights, she lay listening to the machines whirring and felt utterly terrified. The more afraid she was, the more isolated she felt. But then one day, she stopped crying. She was still in pain, still tired, but she no longer asked, "Why me?" She began to ask, "What is this illness teaching me?" From then on, everything gradually changed. She was no longer stressed when looking at her medical records. She started reading books on psychology and Buddhism. She practiced slow breathing every time fear appeared. She observed the pain without resisting it. She accepted it as part of life's journey. She said, "I realized that cancer didn't kill me. It only killed my useless worries." After a year of treatment, she gradually recovered. Doctors were surprised by her health, and her loved ones cried tears of joy. But she herself said that what she was most grateful for was not her recovery, but finding a different perspective on life. She realized that living optimistically is not about denying reality, but learning to love reality, even when it is still imperfect. That is also the teaching in many scriptures. The Buddha once said that the human mind cannot escape suffering because all things are inherently impermanent. But the mind can learn to understand suffering, to transform it. Nothing comes into our life without meaning. When faced with adversity, please do not think you are being punished by karma. That is a misunderstanding that causes more suffering. Instead, understand that karma is the path that leads us to maturity. Today's outcome is just an opportunity for us to sow new seeds for tomorrow. The Buddha taught that an open mind can transform suffering into a path of liberation. It sounds simple, but to live like that requires daily, hourly patience and mindfulness. Because the human mind always tends to follow emotions. When happy, we forget. When suffering, we complain. True practice is not in reciting how many sutras or visiting how many temples, but in how we face adversity. When Ms. Chi changed her question from "Why me?" to "What is this illness teaching me?" that was when her mind was liberated. A grateful mind replaced a resentful mind. Then the energy in her body changed. When the mind lightened, the body also lightened. People often say that when the mind is peaceful, illness diminishes. Science today also proves that one's attitude towards life greatly affects health. A truly optimistic person does not pretend to be fine. They can cry, they can hurt, but after crying, they still know how to move forward. They accept that suffering is present, but suffering is not everything. It is that acceptance that helps them stand up stronger than before. From Ms. Chi's story, we can realize that optimism is not something distant. It is not something only the rich can maintain, nor is it something only the healthy have the right to feel. It is a way of life that anyone can begin at this moment. If you are sad, allow yourself to be sad. If you are in pain, just breathe gently and acknowledge that pain. Then, after everything, ask your heart, what lesson can I learn from this situation? When the question changes, the direction also changes. That is the turning point to step into a new chapter of one's life. When the mind is at peace, the surroundings are also at peace. Life is not overly complex, but our mind constantly wants to analyze it layer by layer. Sometimes, living optimistically simply means returning to the present, to our breath, to our footsteps. Instead of hoping for a perfect future, let's cherish the small moment as we have. Instead of resisting adversity, let's view it as a patient teacher guiding us to grow. Instead of blaming, "Why am I like this?" let's practice asking, "What can I do better starting today?" Living optimistically is not avoiding suffering, but knowing how to smile gently at it. The Buddha once taught that an optimistic mind is a lamp that illuminates the darkness. Whenever suffering arises, please do not ask, "Why?" Gently ask suffering, "What mission do you bring here?" When the question changes, our mind also changes. And when the mind changes, life changes its course. If one day you walk into your own room and find everything so packed that there's no room to step, does that feeling resemble your current state of mind? That room is an image of the mind. Living in this volatile world, we unknowingly pile countless worries, anxieties, disappointments, and resentments onto our minds. Each such emotion is like an old item, no longer valuable, but kept because we can't bear to let it go. Life is inherently impermanent. Every moment passes in its own way. But if the mind has no empty space, will happiness have a place to enter? The ancients said that the body will eventually decay. But if the mind knows how to cleanse itself, the light will remain perfectly intact. Impermanence doesn't take everything away. Impermanence only takes what doesn't know how to let go. According to Buddhist teachings, all suffering begins with attachment. Attachment is holding on, clinging to what has passed, or worrying about what has not yet come. Being angry at someone means we are holding them in our mind every day. Worrying about the future means we are letting the future live in place of the present. Why is letting go so difficult? Because deep in our consciousness, people fear facing emptiness. We think that if we let go, we will have nothing left to cling to. But what we forget is that happiness is not built by adding more, but by removing what is superfluous. Just as a room needs to be cleaned of dust to let in light, the mind needs to make space for peace and happiness to reside. In the human psyche, there always exists a familiar pattern. The more insecure one feels, the more one wants to hold on. The tighter one tries to clench their hand to keep what they call their own. But the tighter one holds, the more exhausted one becomes. Because the object we cling to is inherently impermanent, changing every minute. A heart full of worries is just like a sealed room, all windows closed, piled high with all sorts of old things. How can there be light to hope for peace? How can there be space to hope for happiness? We rush to find new joys, buy a few new things, form a few new relationships. But happiness still remains out of reach. Because the mind is already so full that there's no room for good and beautiful things to stay. The more we struggle, the more tired we become. The more tired we are, the more we suffer. Sometimes we think that letting go is losing a part of ourselves. But in truth, letting go is only returning to our mind the freedom it inherently possesses. This world was not created to cause suffering to anyone. It's just that we forget how to clean our own consciousness. The wise person knows that happiness comes from lightness, not from abundance. The most precious gift is not getting something new, but letting go of old things that have tired the mind. There are people who live in grand houses, but whose hearts are always cramped. There are people who live in small huts, but whose every breath is peaceful. It's not about circumstances, but about whether the mind has space for peace to reside. There is a simple story that awakens many people. It's the story of Mrs. Sao, a woman nearing 70, living alone in a small house at the end of a quiet alley. She didn't have many friends, nor children or grandchildren nearby. Every day, she would sweep the yard, water the plants, cook a simple meal, and then sit quietly, listening to the birds sing or the wind blowing through the old roof tiles. But one thing always weighed heavily on her heart. The house was filled with too many old things. Papers that hadn't been used for years, clothes of those who had passed away, items that had long lost their value. She kept them because she feared that if she threw them away, the memories would vanish. So every corner of the house was covered in thick layers of dust. One day, she sat in front of an old wooden cabinet, opening each drawer. Initially, she only intended to clean, but then she decided to discard a few small items. The more she cleared, the lighter she felt. She told her neighbor that each time she discarded an item, her heart felt a little more peaceful. That simple statement contained a profound transformation. Because Mrs. Sao was not just cleaning her house, she was cleaning her mind. Each old item discarded was a memory understood and let go. Each speck of dust wiped clean was a sorrow clearly seen and then released. And when the cabinet was half empty, she realized the house was much brighter. It turned out that happiness doesn't come from adding new things. Happiness comes from letting go of old things. The Buddha taught that the human mind is like a lake. If constantly stirred, the water remains murky and cannot reflect the moon. The mind is the same. The more angry, the more resentful, the more worried, the murkier it becomes. Every resentment is a layer of dust. Every anger is a stone. Every worry is a layer of fog. The mind can be bright, but we must give it space. Mindfulness, gratitude, and compassion are the three great brooms that help us clean our minds. Mindfulness, so we know when the mind is collecting dust. Gratitude, so we see that life still holds beauty. Compassion, so we don't bind others to our own suffering. In the Agama Sutras, it is written that one who knows how to let go has a mind like a room with open windows. Light naturally streams in, even if not sought. A person's entire life is a journey of clearing. Clearing fears from the past, clearing old regrets, clearing even invisible angers that we sometimes think have disappeared, but are actually lying dormant somewhere. Clearing to make space in the mind for happiness to arrive, space in the heart for love to arise, space in the intention for wisdom to manifest. The cleaner the house, the easier it is to see the sunlight. The clearer the mind, the easier it is to find inner peace. The lesson from Mrs. Sao's story is not just for those nearing the end of their life. It is for all of us right now. Regardless of age or how many stumbles we've had, every day, let's sit down and look at what our mind contains. Sometimes, the mind is full of invisible mountains. Fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of not being good enough, fear of being left behind. What good is keeping each fear an old item. Sometimes the mind is full of bitter tears, anger at others, blaming oneself. Why, after all these years, have I not succeeded? Sometimes we remember something from the past and suddenly feel pain in our heart, and we let that pain linger, never giving it a chance to be sent away. But just like that small room, if it's not cleaned, sooner or later, there will be no room to step. Only when we start cleaning does the mind have a path. So, how to clean the mind? No need to change big things. Just start with very small things. But truly, today, be grateful for someone who once helped you. Tomorrow, forgive someone you once blamed. Next week, spend a few minutes each morning sitting quietly, breathing slowly, to listen to what your mind is saying. This practice is called mindfulness in daily life. No rituals needed, no need to go far. What's most needed is the intention to clean the dust from your heart and a little bit of perseverance. Just like Mrs. Sow didn't clean everything at once, but cleaned one small drawer at a time. But truly, in the Dhammapada, there's a saying that the wise gather little by little, like a bee collecting nectar, like a gold miner sifting sand and gravel before measuring the gold. The mind is the same. You must clean little by little. Don't expect to work today and achieve enlightenment tomorrow. Being patient with your mind is also a way of less loving yourself. Life is not all rosy, but deep within each person's heart, there's a small, very bright corner, just covered with dust. When we diligently clean our consciousness, that light will appear, beautiful naturally, without effort. In the end, what we realize is that letting go doesn't make us lose anything. Letting go only restores our lightness. Letting go so as not to blame life for being harsh. Letting go to have time to love those we love. Letting go so every meal tastes good. Letting go so every evening feels cool with the breeze. Letting go to see that there are still many things that make this life worth living. And when the mind has space, happiness will naturally find its way. Not because we are luckier than others, but because we know how to clean our mind better than yesterday. If one day you feel your heart is too cramped, please remember that sometimes it's not that you lack something, but that you are holding on to too many things that are no longer necessary. Give your mind some space. That space is not loneliness, but a place for happiness to visit. The mind is like a room. To have light, you must clean the dust. Every resentment, every anger, every worry is dust. And gratitude, mindfulness, and compassion are the brooms waiting for us to pick them up. When we begin to know how to clean our mind, that is when life truly changes. You can start today by choosing one thing to let go of. Perhaps let go of an anger that is no longer useful. Let go of a relationship that has run its course. Let go of comparing yourself to others. Let go of the question, why haven't I succeeded yet? And replace it with the question, what can I learn from the present? When the mind begins to have space, happiness will have a place to sit. A peaceful, simple place, not noisy, but warm enough. And then we will truly feel a truth. Happiness is not something far away. Happiness is this breath, this moment, when we softly smile. Because then the heart is a little lighter. When the mind is cleansed, light will naturally find a way to shine through. No need to cling to anything. No need to chase after anything. Just knowing to let go of unnecessary worries is enough to open up a new sky. And there, you will meet yourself, light and free. Because life only changes when we dare to give back to the mind those precious empty spaces, letting go of old things so happiness has a chance to enter. Someone once said that water is truly clear only when it is still, just as the human heart is truly peaceful only when it no longer competes with life. Impermanence flows every second, every minute, but we often want to stand firm against everything, want to keep the good, want to push away the bad, forgetting that all things in life are like a breeze that comes and goes in its own way. Life does not demand us to be perfect. It only asks us to live true to our inner, tranquil self. In truth, the world has never been against us. It's just that when our mind is stressed and tired, everywhere we look, life seems too difficult. But when the mind is at peace, looking back, everything seems normal, even beautiful. Because peace is not found outside. Peace is found within. In Buddhist teachings, suffering arises from craving, aversion, and delusion. Craving is wanting to grasp more. Aversion is wanting to push away. Delusion is not seeing the true nature of all things clearly. The more one chases after winning and losing in competitions, the more one loses inner stillness. Then we think that victory is proof of our worth. But in truth, the more we contend, the heavier our heart becomes. Silence is not losing. Silence is knowing contentment. Silence is not weakness. Silence is protecting our mind from unnecessary friction. One who understands the Dharma does not try to prove anything. They just walk gently, because they understand that when the mind is at peace, what more needs to be proven? The human psyche has a strange rule. The more afraid of losing, the more one fights. The more one fights, the more tired one becomes. The more tired one becomes, the more one wants to prove that they are not inferior to anyone. It's an endless loop. Many people live as if running a lifelong marathon without knowing where they are running. At work, they want to be above all others. In relationships, they want the other person to follow their thoughts. In their family, they want their children to do as they wish, even if it may not be truly suitable. And when things don't go as they wish, resentment and blame arise in their hearts, and they complain. Life is unfair. But in reality, only the mind is not at peace. Life remains as it is, neither more nor less. Some people seek peace by changing jobs, changing cities, changing partners, or changing living environments. External change is necessary, but if we carry the same tense mindset to a new place, the old sufferings will recur. The Buddha once taught that one who conquers 1,000 armies is not equal to one who conquers oneself. Conquering others is only a temporary victory. Conquering oneself is a lasting victory. And the path to conquering oneself is not by competing to win or lose, but by turning inward and asking the mind whether what one is pursuing is for true happiness or merely out of fear of being seen as a loser. There is a story about a Zen master and a young man. The young man came and said, "I have traveled many places, met many people, learned many things, but my heart is still not at peace." The Zen master was silent for a moment, then poured tea. The tea filled the cup and continued to overflow. The young man quickly said, "Master, it's overflowing." The Zen master looked at him and said, "Your mind is like this teacup. It is too full of thoughts, judgments, competition, desires, so peace has no place to stay. To learn new things, you must first let go of old things. To have a peaceful mind, you must return empty space to the mind. Each time you are silent is a time you are sowing seeds of peace. Each time you let go is a time you are getting closer to freedom." Those words are not just to be heard as beautiful sayings, but to be practiced in every moment of life. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, it is written that the mind is the root of all phenomena. If the mind is at peace, even dirt turns to gold. If the mind is worried, even gold turns to dust. The world does not force us to rush or compete. Everything is merely a reflection from within the mind. A person who knows how to stop, how to breathe slowly, how to be silent for a moment, will realize that they don't need to be superior to anyone to be happy. They understand that every breath is a gift. Every meal is a miracle. Every encounter has its own meaning. The lighter the mind, the easier it is to find happiness. And the more silent the inner self, the more one hears the voice of truth. True happiness does not come from proving oneself right. It comes from knowing how to smile. Even if today everything is not perfect, we still maintain a kind heart. Life does not demand us to be extraordinary. It only asks us to live true to the inherent goodness within ourselves. Silence is the lotus of the mind. The lotus grows from mud, but is not defiled by the mud. Humans are the same. Living amidst life, we can still maintain a bright space in our minds. That space is when we stop competing, stop chasing after the success of others, and begin to listen to what our heart is saying. Our mind doesn't need to be ostentatious or noisy. Our mind only needs peace from a Buddhist perspective. Silence is a form of meditation. It's not just the absence of external sound, but inner silence. The stillness when the heart no longer chases after useless things. Only when the mind is truly still do we see the things we once missed. See the beauty in a loved one's face. See happiness in a simple meal. See warmth in a glance. Feel lightness when we forgive. And see life as beautiful when we are grateful. It is also in those moments that we realize that silence is not escape, but a return to ourselves, a return to goodness, a return to the truth that we don't need to compete in life to feel our worth. The greatest lesson we can realize when we slow down, when we know to be less competitive and more silent, is that happiness doesn't need to be proven. Happiness just needs to be felt. Happiness doesn't need noise. Happiness just needs the mind to know how to smile. From understanding that, we begin to let go. The burden of needing to be recognized by others. From understanding that, we dare to live true to ourselves. And that is the foundation of peace. So how to apply this in life? You can start with very small things. When misunderstood, instead of trying to argue back, take a long breath to let your mind settle. When you see someone angry, instead of responding with another fit of anger, remember that that person is hurting somewhere that you cannot see. When you feel tired, allow yourself to rest without feeling guilty. When you feel your heart wanting to compete, ask yourself if it's truly necessary. Every time we choose silence over competitiveness, we are sowing a seed of peace in the soil of our mind. That seed will blossom on the day we can smile at ourselves after years of struggling. Ultimately, this life is not a competition for someone to win. This life is a journey for us to learn how to return to our heart. Learn to let go when needed. Learn to cherish what we have and know how to look at each other with compassionate eyes. If one day we realize we no longer need to prove anything, that is not an end point, but the starting moment of a new journey. A journey of the mind, a journey of ease, a journey of peace. Because deep down, peace is not found externally. Peace is found within. And when the mind is at peace, we need nothing more, nor do we need to prove anything more. Because each time we are silent is a time we sow seeds of peace. And each time we let go is a time we step closer to freedom. Just be less competitive and more silent. Then one day, you will see life naturally change. And the most wondrous thing is that you will also see yourself transformed, lighter, gentler, and brighter from within.